So let's take a look at the internet weather for this week. So the top 10 most probed ports for this week. Telnet's the top. Not too much of a surprise there. Things seem to have settled down a bit from the previous weeks when we had a whole bunch of new ports. But 23 is at the top, followed by 22. That's Telnet and SSH, respectively. 1433 is SQL. 445 is SMB. Wow. You know, let's do it as a quiz. I'll say the number. You say the number. 8545.
You're gonna get me on that one.
All right. That's the GF daemon for Ethereum. 80. Web. 443.
Web.
Also web. 3389.
RDP.
Correct. 2000.
I tried to look that one up. It looks like malware, mostly related to malware.
This is related to vulnerability in the Mikrotik routers that we were talking about for the last few weeks. Yep. And 21?
21. Telnet?
FTP.
FTP. Yes.
All right. That was pretty good, though. That was really good. The 4043 is up by 7. It's possible this has something to do with a recently released Drupal bug, but since it's encrypted and all we have is flow data, it's really hard to say definitively.
Right.
But that one's the big jump for this week. So taking a look at the most sources probing, again, 23 is at the top. Actually, it's back up at the top. It's moved 2 spots from last week. 445, again, is SMB. 2000 is that Mikrotik router, and it seems to be someone's building an IoT botnet based on those routers. So it's been up the top. 80 ICMP is just echo requests, so someone's pinging the internet and we're picking that up. 5555 is the Android-adb remote debug bridge. 81 is an alternate web port. I think it's usually related to the go-ahead web server that some webcams use. 6881 is BitTorrent.
GDP.
80 we talked about is web. 22 is SSH. 21 is FTP. So taking a look at 23 is back up. Briefly, a couple weeks ago, we had a spike in some interesting ports related to other IoT vulnerabilities, and we actually had a big drop in Telnet. I think, and this is my personal theory, that some of those vulnerabilities are no longer being scanned. A couple weeks ago, we saw some shuffle in those numbers and some new ports emerge, but it seems like the botnets behind that scanning have sort of backed off and decided to refocus their efforts elsewhere. 445 SMB is still slowly creeping up. This continues to be a problem. It's ever since WannaCry, which is almost, I mean, we're like 2 months shy of a year.
Yeah.
It's still a problem, and apparently there are still more machines out there that are getting infected and continuing to scan.
You know, it's been so much information about SMB out there that it's really surprising that there's still so much scanning. You know, obviously they're scanning because they're still finding devices.
So this is port 2000 TCP. That's the Mikrotik bandwidth test port. Mostly it seems to be a single botnet that's scanning for this, but you can see we had a couple outlier spikes every once in a while. I believe that those were from a single provider in the Netherlands who is scanning for those. That's what those tiny little spikes are, but the rest I think are a single daily cycle of a single group. 5555, the Android-adb debug bridge it's a common feature of Android devices. You can sort of get on the console and muck around with the operating system. Apparently, someone talked about Amazon Fire TV sticks. You can actually enable the debug bridge from a menu inside of it. And a lot of people who are interested in installing other software on their Amazon Fire TV stick to watch other content that's not usually provided, this is a common thing because you'll enable the debug bridge and then you'll use that as a way of pushing other software onto the device. But some people don't close that. So you've got a bunch of devices with a debug port that's open. And it seems like this is what they're looking for.
Wouldn't these, like an Amazon Fire Stick, wouldn't that be typically behind a NAT?
Typically it would be, I agree. And I don't know, maybe there's enough of a population for this that they're not? Or maybe some people have punched holes for some reason?
So maybe for performance, they punched holes, because I know they do that with like Xbox.
Yes.
Xbox Live, they punch a hole through their NAT for their Xbox for the performance.
It's possible, yeah. But you can see in the last couple of weeks, this has definitely kicked up by a couple thousand scan sources per hour. It was somewhere around, I want to say 4,000, and we're peaking around 7.5. So port 4786 is the Cisco Smart Install. We talked about this a couple weeks ago as well, and there was some significant scanning. I think it was at the start of the month that the vulnerability was released publicly, that people were made aware that there was a major problem. That this is it's a service that you can just connect to with no authentication that has elevated or perhaps root privileges So it's been around for a couple of weeks now, and we can see a consistent scan. I did not find out who owns the IPs for that consistent scan, but originally there was no noise, there was no baseline of any significant amount, and you can sort of see there's a population of constant scanning. But still a small number of sources, less than, I want to say less than 5 for that baseline. But the spikes are all in the range of 140 to 160 sources. This is 8545, I mentioned before. Ethereum, the GF daemon. Apparently, if you misconfigure it, you can expose your money to the internet and people will come by and take it. Yeah, that one has been wavering up and down the last couple of weeks. I just want to keep an eye on that. And port 7002 was one that I thought was kind of interesting this week. It didn't make it to the top 10. I don't think it made it to the top 20, but it did trigger our baseline alarming that something has changed. While it doesn't stack up to the ones that are in the top 10 or even the top 20, a change in the interest in scanning a particular port may be an indicator of future activity. So we'll keep an eye on that one for now. I saw this port in conjunction with Synology Disk Station NASs, but also references to Samsung Magic Info displays, which are like kiosk information displays.
Right.
You can see at the bottom there, we've got a small uptick, the number of scan flows per hour. Now we've got a baseline. Before that, we had nothing, and except for those periodic spikes. But now we've got somebody who's interested, at least in a small scale. So who knows? We'll keep an eye on this. If it becomes a bigger thing, then we'll report on it more. And that's it for the internet weather.
Great.